Today we're going to walk through setting up a camera to use in LightBurn, doing the camera lens calibration and the camera alignment calibration. So the first thing you'll need to do is get a web camera. USB connected camera is the only type that LightBurn directly supports. You can get an external application that will let you use IP-based cameras. We hope to support those in the future, but we haven't got that yet. Do be careful when selecting a camera. Go into our forums and do a search for cameras, because there are some considerations for what type of camera to get depending on which OS you're running, as well as how you plan to mount it or where. There's a fair bit of information in the forums, and we will be providing more on our site as well. So once you have a camera set up, connected, I have mine mounted on the inside of my laser, and I'll show a picture of that here. Go to Window and enable the camera control window, and you'll see it here. This is where it shows up by default, in behind your cut list. You can move this, that's fine. If you click on camera here, you should be able to find the camera that you've mounted. Mine is called E2 camera. I'm going to pull this window out just to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. This camera view is actually live right now. I can move my hand around underneath it. So in order to get LightBurn to take this picture, which is fairly heavily fisheyed, and turn it into something useful, we have to do what's called lens calibration and alignment calibration. And those are the two things we're going to do next. So go to Tools, pick Calibrate Camera Lens, and you'll be presented with this window. Choose your camera, and you should see the view here. This page is where we do the lens calibration, and you'll see a link here that says click here to download the circle pattern image. Now what this is talking about is this. This pattern is what LightBurn uses to measure the distortion of the lens of the camera. And so you can see as I get close to the sides here, this warps a little bit. It looks pretty good in the middle, but on the edges you can see that the camera that I have right now is fairly heavily fisheyed. Some are worse. This is only a 140 degree lens. A 160, 170, or 180 are considerably worse, and they're going to be harder to calibrate, but it's still possible. With this card, you print it out at the size that the image is originally, so it works out to about 1/4 of a standard sheet of letter paper. I have this mounted on foam board, which is just styrofoam with a paper core on either side, or styrofoam core with paper on either side. You want this to be as absolutely flat as you possibly can. So I've just used glue stick to attach this to foam board. The flatter this is, the better your results. If you have this image curved somewhat like this, instead of being nice and flat like this, the code in LightBurn that is trying to compensate for the distortion of the lens in the camera will instead be compensating for the distortion of your paper, and you don't want that. It's going to affect your results. So, short version, make sure that this is as flat as you can get it. All right. The next part is up here in this window. You see this checkbox, green checkbox, showing you that you should make sure that the card is absolutely facing the camera, not at an angle. So what that means is you want this card to directly face the camera, not be tilted slightly off to one side or the other, tilted away. You want it to directly face the camera. And you want it to stay facing the camera as you move the image around. So you don't move the image in a circle like this around the camera. You move the image like this relative to the camera. So if the camera was over here looking this way, I would move this card back and forth like this. That's important. You want this card to point as flat at the camera as possible. You can angle it a little bit if that helps. And there are cases where it might, but again, as flat as possible is good. So let's get started. So This little view here shows you the ideal position for the card for this particular calibration image that we're taking. You're going to take 9 captures maximum. You can actually get away with doing fewer, and we'll talk about that when we get there. This image is showing you which capture LightBurn wants you to take. And basically what you're doing is putting the card so that it occupies roughly 1 square of a tic-tac-toe board, and you're going to do all 9 squares, if that makes sense. So, hold the card as still as you can. If you can rest it on something, that's even better. Fill approximately the space that it looks like it's asking you for there, and hit capture. And you'll see pattern found and a score. Now this score, you should be trying to get it as low as you possibly can. It is possible to get numbers that are 0.06, 0.05. It's not easy, but it's doable. And you'll see you can recapture here. There's 0.12, that's actually pretty good. If I tilt this funny, hold it a little weird, you see that number goes up quite a bit. If it's really crap and off the boundary here, you'll see, hey, I found the pattern, but you know, it gives me a pretty bad score. So hold it where it's asking, hold it as still as you can. That one's not bad. Lighting is also important, and my lighting here is kind of crap, and I apologize for that. There we go. So 0.13, that's great. So click next. Now it's saying bottom edge. So we're going to do basically the same thing that we did before. Hold the card nice and flat, roughly the size that it looks in that picture, and hit capture. 0.23 is actually not a bad score. I'm going to try and get it a little lower. You can also move the image around a little bit within the frame. Sometimes that helps. 0.16, I'm pretty happy with that, so we'll click next. This one, don't let the image fool you. The picture in this is quite distorted because this sample image was from a 160 or 170 degree lens, but really what LightBurn is asking for is this picture over here. It's not bad. I think we can do better. I'm reasonably happy with that. We'll move on to the next one. On the next side, lighting over here is a little better, so this one might improve. That's pretty good. When you take your first capture, you might have noticed that when I did it, the image here looked really weird and round and warped. Don't worry about it, it corrects as you go. So this one up here, that's a great score, so I'm happy with that. Now, because I have done well and gotten good scores for the captures up to this point, for the center, the bottom and top, and the 2 sides, I have the option to skip the 4 corners because my captures have been really good. So I can either click the skip button, or I can go through and capture images for these ones as well. I'm going to do at least one. 0.21, that's a good one. Click next. It's also worth noting that LightBurn doesn't check which picture you gave it. So I just did the corner down here. I'm going to skip this one and go to the next one over here. And you'll notice it's asking me for this bottom corner. I'm just going to do this one up here. That's great. I can click next, and I'm going to skip the next 2. So we've done the camera lens calibration, and now the next step is the camera alignment. Now for that, you need a piece of material. I have a fairly crappy piece of wood that I've placed in my machine, roughly centered in the view of the camera. If you have a large bed, try to get a piece of material that is large enough to cover a fairly wide area. The default for this test pattern cut is, as you'll see here, 200 millimeters square, or an 8-inch square. That's great if you have a little K40 or something like that, but if you have a large machine, you should use the scale factor here to scale this image up to fill more of your bed, because it'll give you better accuracy. It'll give you a much better result. So I am going to bump this up to 200. If you have a a movable Z, you may want to set the material thickness. This will shift the bed a little bit. Most of the time you don't need to do this. Choose an appropriate speed and power for the machine that you're using. This is going to do essentially a surface engraving, and so I want to use a fairly low power and a relatively high speed because I have a 100 watt CO2 machine. Your numbers will be different than mine. I'm also going to enable air assist. When you have a scale that you think is appropriate for your machine, hit the frame button and LightBurn will run a frame around the job. Use that to make sure that your material is lined up properly. In my case, this material, or this piece of wood that I've got, is actually a little bit small, so I'm going to try 180 and frame that again. Looks like I'm actually going to need to go to 170. And I think that's about perfect. So once you have lined up the material on the bed and picked a size that's appropriate, go ahead and cut it. So make sure that the power and speed that you choose is appropriate for your machine and gives you a relatively dark surface marking. You're going to be trying to find these targets that it's cutting out in the camera view, and so you want to make sure that it's well lit and that you can see them so that you can do the next step properly. So once you've done your cut and you're happy with the result, be very careful. Do not move either the camera or the targets from this point on. Your camera should be mounted to the laser in such a way that the position when you are using the camera for bed capture is always in the same place. If your lid wobbles or doesn't have hard stops, that may be a problem. It will cause your camera position to shift slightly, and that's going to affect the accuracy of your results, so do be aware of that. I'm happy with the output here, so I click next. Now you can see a crappy picture of the bed here. If you need to move the head of your laser out of the way, for example, so if mine finished here, that's going to make it difficult for me to mark the targets, so you can use these buttons to jog or move your laser to one of the corners. When you're happy with the image that you see here, click capture and you'll see a preview of it over here. I'm happy with this, I'll click next. So now I'm going to use this view to mark these targets, and you can see that they are numbered. The lighting here is a little terrible, so I may need to do this again. That's much better. So what you're doing in this view is, just like the preview in LightBurn, you can use the click to drag or mouse wheel to zoom in and out. you want to mark these targets with a little crosshair. So you're telling LightBurn where each of these marks is in the camera view in numbered order. So be as accurate as you can be. You want to hit dead center and as close to dead center as you absolutely can on each of these marks. And you can zoom out to check. So that one's good. And again, be careful and take your time, because the more accurate you do this, the better your results are going to be when you are trying to use the camera. If you need to reposition a mark, if you're close to it already, double-clicking near it will move that mark. And if you really mess up, you can just click undo last and it will remove the mark completely. I think those are about as good as I'm going to get. Maybe move that one just a touch. When you're happy with your 4 marks, click Next and click Finish. If you go back now to the camera control view, so I have done the lens calibration, I've done the camera alignment. If I click Update Overlay, I now see an image from the camera projected onto the backdrop of my page here. And these marks are accurate, or should be. If I click the click to jog and zoom in here to marker number 1 and move my laser head to there, you can see in this view the laser moved to that marker. If I look at my laser right now, or take a picture of it, the laser head is exactly in the center of that mark. So if I click show last position, let's move this to right. Okay, that's as close as it's going to get just because I've told it to snap 2 millimeters. I am going to take a picture of this right now to show you where my laser is pointing. So you'll be able to see it. Again, if I click one of the other targets, like number 3, it's basically perfect. So that's good. So, what do you use it for? The short answer is you use this to line up work on your machine. So if I have an odd-shaped piece of material, like I do here, for example, and I want to do a cut that matches this very, very precisely, I'm going to try to put a circle or an arc right here around this. So I'm going to put a point here, I'm going to put a point there, I'm going to put a point there. I have this turned off, that's why they're not showing up. So I'm going to go into edit mode, smooth that point. Try to make this fit nice and close to this circle or to this curve. Alright, so it's not beautiful, but it'll get the point across. Basically what I'm going to try to do is cut a line right on the outside edge of that, just to demonstrate how close you can get with this. So I'm going to run this. And I'm going to take a picture so I can show you where that ended up. And I'm also going to go back to the camera control view, jog my laser head out of the way, and click Update Overlay. Turn my light off again because that's too bright. There we go. If I go back to my cut list and hide this, you can actually see that line right there. It's a little bit out of focus, but that is that line. And if I turn it back on, that's how close we are. So the accuracy is honestly very good. If I toggle it off and on, you can actually see this line here and the line in LightBurn that matches it. The camera image is actually a little bit blurrier, but in real life it's very, very close. So you could use this to place anything on the bed of the laser and perform a cut. So as an example, if I wanted to outline this one with a box, if I draw a box around it, just like this, tell it to cut, make sure that I have removed other line here, close my lid and click start. I'm going to hide that, and if I update the overlay, you can actually see the box that I just cut is right there, and the one in LightBurn is right on top of it. And so this opens up the ability to cut or mark irregular items, strange shapes, fit cuts onto oddly shaped materials like this, and so on. And that is the entire point of using a camera with LightBurn. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.